Hello, everyone. My name is Matthew Ogden. I'm an editor with LaRouchepack.com. Today is September 3rd. It's Labor Day. You're joining us for our regular weekly show with the national candidate slate. And we're joined by 4 of the members of the candidate slate over Skype video. And then here in the studio, we have Diane Sayer and Mr. Lyndon LaRouche.
The issue, I think, which is most important in terms of its relevance, I had an experience yesterday of people fumbling around with the issue of the election campaign. Now, there's only one real issue. If you're talking about a serious campaign, there's only one serious issue. That issue is Obama's commitment to war. Obama himself has set the challenge by organizing poor fools on the street and elsewhere to say, yes, it's bad, but it's not that bad. And when you get that kind of thing where people are being cranked up and terrified into reciting that piece of garbage, then you realize where the real problem is. The President of the United States program is that thermonuclear war done by him would not really be that bad. That's the slogan of the campaign. All other issues are relatively irrelevant compared to that one. They're not irrelevant in and of themselves. They're irrelevant in terms of the campaign. Because everything else is being used. It's not that bad. No, you exaggerate. It's not that bad. Oh, you must be something wrong with you. Look, there are other issues here we have to consider. When the issue now, and has been ever since Libya, the issue is thermonuclear war. And you've just seen, produced by us, or on our behalf, in this case, of what thermonuclear war means in this setting. And everybody knows, who knows anything, apart from those who don't wish to know, is that the issue here is the current President of the United States has been preparing for one mission under direction from the British monarchy, and that is thermonuclear war. Now that means, what that means is not necessarily thermonuclear war, but I think he'd be sorely disappointed if he didn't have it. But the intention is to say, as has been all along, you either submit to me or we kill you all. That's the issue. That's what you're up against. That's always been the issue. That's why he was put in. Why do you think they went to the garbage pail of humankind and dragged up something which had the psychological resemblance to the Emperor Nero? Why would they do such a thing? This guy has no real brain power. He has no real ideas. Huh? He's a basketball, not a basketball player. The basketballs play him. Apparently, he sits up there in the division between the public side and the private side of the White House, and he sits up there playing with his balls. And this guy, and you see what he does he kills people. It's like a basketball game for him, and where he's one of the spectators. But he dribbles a lot, and that qualifies him as a basketball player. So this guy is actually being used, and we have only a few things that prevent this thing from happening. Only a few things have stopped thermonuclear war so far. They haven't actually stopped it, but they've stopped it so far. And that too, Russia and China on one side. Russia and China are in full opposition to any gesture which would make concessions to Obama or the British Queen, or any concessions to war. They are prepared to deal with war only when it starts. And they will deal with it. But the result of that, anybody who's not an idiot in a dream world, is the virtual extinction of the human species. Now, we've had a presentation on the site last night and today. It's on the site this morning on exactly what this is all about. And you've seen it. You've seen a demonstration. And the details, the essential facts have all been presented to you by the media, our media. And they've understood clearly by the Joint Chiefs of Staff of the United States, who's one of the stalwarts out there, who's actually so far delayed us from having a thermonuclear war come down on the American people. And they're not going to give in. And the Queen is going to become very angry, like the Witch of Endor or something. And that's where we are. So the only issue is to get Obama out of office now before he can actually be in a position to launch thermonuclear war. And there is no other issue in the election campaign. There are other issues in terms of the economy. There are other issues in terms of the nation's policies in general. But there is no issue of the election itself except throwing him out of office. There is no other issue in the campaign, in the election. In the campaign atmosphere, yes, there are many other issues, but you have to throw Obama out first. If you've not thrown him out first, you don't have any other issues. And only after you've thrown him out, then you have a lot of issues, particularly the three that we have proposed as campaign issues. But you've got to understand that something has gone on. Not only do we have an enemy of the United States as its president, and this guy is an avowed enemy of the existence of the United States. And you can't compromise with anything on this thing. He must be removed from office or you don't live. And a lot of people, the American people, don't live either. And around the world don't live. And you had the presentation on the site, which was presented last night but performed this morning. And that was the hard truth. That is the only real truth about the campaign itself. Once we get the campaign matter settled, then we have a lot of things to take up, especially three things to take up. The three things mentioned. And what we saw in the discussion we had last night, where the way the so-called issues were discussed, showed to me that our organization was not in focus on this matter. There's only one issue, getting Obama out. What's the issue? Thermonuclear war. You have to remove him so you don't get thermonuclear war. First thing you have to do before conducting an argument or debate is to have the spectators and participants survive. And the other concept is a diversion. Now, a diversion is done what and how? A diversion is done to appeal to susceptible features of the suckers. Now, they're not going to try to divert you by things that you are not going to react to. They're going to divert you by presenting you things that you think you can cope with and you think are important otherwise, but you're not going to fight the issue of getting this guy thrown out of office now before he can be confirmed as a presidential nominee. Again, That's the first and only thing you consider. Only after you've dealt with that do you have a real campaign issue. And the danger of war comes from citizens who want to discuss different issues than that. It's very way to dealing with any issue. You say, look, if we can prevent this guy from being reelected, there are many issues we're going to have to take up. But the problem is, you're not going to get a chance to take up these issues ever, because they'll kill you first with the President's commitment and the British commitment to thermonuclear war. What have you seen? What do you think has happened? What's the British policy? It's not a U.S. policy. It's the British policy. It's an imported policy. Of course, we got a lot of jerks in the United States. The production of jerks has increased greatly. Not jobs, but jerks. And but you have to understand where the source comes from. The source is the British monarchy, which does not necessarily have the support of the Scots or many English persons. And what's the policy? And what's the manifestation of the implementation of that policy? The policy is to reduce the human population from 7 billion people to approximately no more than 1 billion persons. Now, has that program been installed as a British program? Yes. How was it installed? Well, it was installed essentially when Bill Clinton was left office, and you've got some Bush League characters in there, and then you've got Obama. Obama was a British creation for precisely this mission. And the British Queen is saying, and you see what her policies are, they're already being enacted. The genocide program of the British monarchy is being enacted. It's enacted in Africa, obviously. It's being enacted in other places throughout the world. A program of genocide. The British Queen thinks there are too many people, and she organized her whole retinue in a large campaign to make this point, that we must reduce the human population. What has happened? Look over your shoulder. How about your food supply for this coming year, this autumn? What happened to your food supply over the course of this year? What happened to your health care? What happened to all the other things that Obama has stripped you of on behalf of Her Majesty? And you want to talk about this issue or that issue or this issue? Are you fools, complete fools? There's one issue, the power to destroy our people. And the power to destroy our people lies in the hands of that president who's running for re-election. If that president is re-elected, you are dead. Your friends are dead. Your nation is virtually dead. You have no other issue to celebrate or worry about. It'll all be taken off your shoulders when they kill you. And the problem is we have a degeneration in the quality of our population. Over the past years, since the assassination of Bobby and Kennedy and his brother, we've had the United States, starting with the war in Indochina, has gone downhill. It was already going downhill under Truman. Truman was a British agent. That's essentially what he was. He's a Wall Street character, Wall Street bum, and a British agent who had set out to destroy everything that Franklin Roosevelt represented. Mm-hmm. And he did a fairly visible job of doing that with Bertrand Russell's help. Mm-hmm. And then Eisenhower got in by the way he handled the Korean War. And he prevented this thing from getting much worse while he was president for 2 terms. But then we had a threat of Nixon. Well, that was postponed for a while. And Mrs. Roosevelt and her candidate won the election and installed a program and a change in direction of programs which would have been a miracle of success for this nation. And he was killed by the same Anglo-American scumbags who we're fighting today. The Dulles brothers, you know, that crowd. Similar kinds of people. And the United States has been going to hell every year, every day, since John F. Kennedy was assassinated. And that performance is measurable. It's fully documented. And even the Kennedys, they killed them off, most of them. You got one up there in Boston area who survived. But he's not much of a candidate. Hasn't got much of a program worth anything. He's just a poor grandson of Bobby Kennedy. And on Bobby Kennedy's behalf, we have a certain sympathy for this fellow, but he's not much on performance. That's the kind of problem we have. But these are all issues we can deal with. The one issue that we have to deal with, first and foremost, you've got to not prevent this war from happening. And the only thing you can do, the only possible thing that you could do to save this nation and save your own neck is get Obama out of office first. Once he's out of office, you can do things. And not until then. And that was the problem. We were having these discussions last night about various campaign issues, and there is no other campaign issue. All other things that could be considered campaign issues come only after we settle one thing. You dumb cluck. You think it's only bad? You don't know how stupid you are. You don't deserve to live if you're measuring your behavior like your brains. But we want you to live anyway and hope that you'll get smart for a change. That's the way you got to look at this thing. And that's what you got to put out on the street. You're dealing with war. You're dealing with thermonuclear war. The greatest kill potential against mankind which ever existed to our knowledge. And you're not resisting it. You want to discuss different issues than that? Unfortunately, we do not have a hotel that you can live in on Mars. So you're going to have to deal with this problem on Earth and put everything else behind and just explain to people. Look, if you're dead, buddy, you don't have any other issues. And if you're tolerating Obama, you're dead. You brought it on yourselves. We've got the Joint Chiefs of Staff and other actors in the United States which are defending you against this now. Mm-hmm. You've got people in Europe who want to defend civilization against this. Russia is trying to defend civilization. China is trying to defend civilization. And what are you going to do? Say, it's not really that bad? The death of the human species is not that bad? Because that's exactly what the risk is. And what do you got out of all those foolish candidates, all those foolish people in the Senate, in the House of Representatives? They are not concerned with this problem. Yes, they are concerned about some aspects of it, but they're not concerned enough to cure the problem, which they have the power to cure. This guy must be thrown out of office. If he's not thrown out of office, you don't have it. You don't have a thing. Nothing is coming to you. until you decide that he's going to be thrown out of office, and find enough people to join you in that wonderful parade. That's the key issue here. And there are no other issues which rank any close to that. Getting Obama thrown out of office. If you had to get the Republican Party to take it over to keep him from getting in office, you'd do it. Because the one thing you know, this guy must not be president. That's the one thing that must not happen. We don't have to give over to the Republicans. We can lead the whole process if we provide real leadership. If we can stop this Obama's drive toward war, we can then deal with the problem of Republican disorientation. But if we're not alive, there's not much we can do, you know?
You know, just over this past weekend, I was reviewing Kennedy's speech in October of '62 around the Cuba Missiles Crisis, and Ronald Reagan's speech when he announced the SDI policy. And what came across very clearly, and also even in Kennedy's speech about the space program, is you could tell in his mind he had as a constant thought in the back of his mind the horrible danger to the human race of this nuclear arsenal, of what a nuclear war would unleash. It was clearly something that was a driving factor in the way he thought about things and how he conducted himself, with a certain type of real thoughtfulness.
Well, one thing we know about that, definitely, you have the Kennedy family, and you had the old man, who was practically a fascist, a real fascist, but a British fascist. And the brothers managed to sort of keep him out of it. Mm-hmm. But what was their legacy? The legacy was the one they adopted. Jack and Bobby both agreed on the Franklin Roosevelt legacy. And they were both pushed into office to a large degree by Eleanor Roosevelt. And the whole campaign, which I witnessed with her, I sat in on some of these campaign meetings she did. It was on that issue, on the Franklin Roosevelt, return to Franklin Roosevelt. And that was what Eisenhower supported at that time. That's what Douglas MacArthur supported. And others of the same category, same general category. And we fought against these guys because we knew they were fascists, like the Queen of England, who's a fascist. She's a fascist with a crown. But that's the same thing, and that this is, therefore, our job is to save the United States. That's our ultimate responsibility as Americans. But that means throwing out Obama first, and then straightening out the Republicans. And by straightening out the Republicans, you may bring a little sense of shame to embarrassing Democrats.
Well, you do have the I was just going to say the walls are closing in around Obama in a relatively directed way, led by what you have done. I mean, you've got not only what General Dempsey said in London, which has now gotten play worldwide, and people recognize exactly what the subtext of what he was saying was. You've also got the open letter by Representative Walter Jones to the White House, directly to Barack Obama, saying, what you did in Libya was an illegal war. This was unconstitutional, and it's an impeachable crime, and you are on notice. If you try to do something like this with Syria, with Iran, this is a crime against the Constitution. And then you've got also other voices from all sorts of different quarters saying not only a crime against the Constitution, but crimes against humanity, using the Nuremberg Tribunal, saying what Tony Blair, the Blair Doctrine, is what Obama is the incarnation of. What Tony Blair did in Iraq and still is doing is a war crime, and that these things must be prosecuted.
And that's what was raised from South Africa.
Yes.
On exactly that.
Right.
I think it's important for people to actually realize how quickly this threat of thermonuclear war would be over by getting Obama out, and this is what you're saying, but you have to I think it's very important to restate the fact that without the United States, there is no thermonuclear war. Israel, Netanyahu, wouldn't be able to pull off the types of attacks that they would be pulling off against Iran, the threat against Syria. None of this would be possible without the United States and without Obama being at the forefront of pushing this drive for thermonuclear war. And I mean, it's just really thinking about how everything falls on the courage and the guts of leadership in the United States to realize that the United States, by getting Obama out, means we actually stop this threat of thermonuclear war, because the British wouldn't have anybody to carry out their insane plan. The British can't do it on their own. They don't have the weaponry. The French can't do it. The Israelis can't do it. And that Obama is the weapon that they're using to carry out this insane war.
Well, it's like all these Democrats who are saying, well, or, you know, as Lynn was saying, it's not that bad, which is the population as a whole. But then a lot of the Democratic Party wants to shuffle this off and say, well, it's not Obama. You know, he's not behind this. When in reality, from people within the Israeli establishment, they've acknowledged that it's not Netanyahu leading it, but that Obama is pushing it from behind. There is an acknowledgement now that the discrepancy that you get coming out of the Joint Chiefs, what they've been saying concerning Syria and so forth, is much different than what Obama is saying. So these guys who want to sit there and say, well, it's not Obama, bull. It is Obama. He's laying it out clearly. You can see this by the fact that the Joint Chiefs don't want this war and have been very clear against it. And, you know, I think for these Democrats, you know, take Thursday night, which is going to be the showcase of Obama's killing, led up by John Kerry, the virtual turncoat in this. You know, if that doesn't give you a clue, frankly, I think that this Thursday showcase of the killing probably has more to do with an attempt to intimidate the Democratic Party, to say, you were complicit in all this because you didn't stop me, and may I remind you where, if you do try to stop me, what's in store for you. I am the stone cold killer in this. So I just think these guys who sit back and say, well, it's not Obama, they know it's Obama, and either they move or they will get on Obama's kill list.
The point is, you've got to say that. If you don't say it, you can't stop it. Because most Americans know what's in process. Mm-hmm. They're just cowards. And they don't want to believe it. But they do believe it. But they hope that if they say the right thing, mercy will be bestowed upon them. And you know, the worst thing to have when you're up against a killer is a lack of guts. And what we're seeing the U.S. population is dominated by its lack of guts. Now, you can then turn around, as you can say in Detroit or elsewhere, you can say, well, we understand how that came about. We had a fight to save the auto industry. I picked up on it. We did manage to stir something up. We stirred up a real resistance on shutting down the auto industry. Mm-hmm. We had the right people, we had the right ideas, we had the right policies. It could have worked, but we couldn't do it at that time. Now, what's happened now? What do you see around the nation? You see gutlessness because you have people who, you know, with illness and all these kinds of things that descend upon them. They feel helpless. Helpless. And the worst thing you can do is show a lack of guts. You're not going to cure them by arguing with them. You're going to cure them and say, well, I have the guts to fight this process. Do you? You apparently have lost your guts. Let's get your guts back. And when somebody tries to fob you off with it's not that bad, that's what you have to say. Hey, Stop being a gutless wonder and face the truth. That's the only response. I know you're gutless. I understand maybe why you're gutless. But what you're doing is you're acting like a gutless idiot. And no good will ever come to you out of what you're doing. The only chance you have is to fight for once in your life.
Well, that's what you did on a radio program when I remember the host was saying, well, what if we get Obama out? Who's going to come in? Blah, blah. He was asking, and you said, no, we don't survive if Obama is not removed, period. The rest of it we'll figure out later. He has to go or we don't survive. And that's the issue. And it's just got to be clear.
That is the issue.
I was just at a labor event this morning, good old Boston Democrats, and it was exactly that response that you're talking about, where, first the excuse they'd make is, well, it's Congress, it's not Obama. And you'd bring up the question of thermonuclear war, and there wasn't really any argument against it, practically. And most people, I made the point to them, look, you guys have stopped fighting. Labor has stopped fighting. You can you can say that the other guy is worse, but if you continue doing what you're doing, there's going to be nothing left. And the fact is that Obama is pushing for thermonuclear war, and that's what they're going to be celebrating at the convention. So, anyway, and then on that question, because most of these people are about to head to the convention, and so this should be on their minds, the fact of what it is that they're participating in, and the alternative. So I just wanted to report that, and maybe just add on to Keisha's point, the fact that it's true that without the United States, the world, the British couldn't carry out their thermonuclear war, but it's also true that the Russians and the Chinese wouldn't start it. It would only begin under Obama. So unless Obama is removed, that's this war drive is clearly on the table.
I think in comment on that, what you say is absolutely true. That everything has been done by Dempsey and company, by Russians, by the Russian government, Russian military included, and by the Chinese military included. Everything has been done to avoid thermonuclear war. And it's taken great restraint and organization to bring that part of the thing about. So the only way the war can occur is if that criminal idiot called the President of the United States is not removed from office, then those who do not remove him from office are to blame, are the criminals. It's no longer him. We know he's a criminal. We know he's a killer. We know he killed people with his health care policies. He killed people with all his economic policies. He killed people for his own pleasure with these regular kill sessions he has. Who are we going to kill this week? Are we going to stuff them first before we roast them? No, and therefore he is the only criminal. Well, there are other criminals. You've got the one sitting in Chicago, this British Tony Blair, who is the architect of the very existence of Obama. Mm-hmm. And therefore that is the other side of it. But there is no excuse for kissing the butt of the mass murderer of the world.
We've talked a lot of times in these discussions about reestablishing the confidence of the American population in the government. And this is something that in the past week I've seen. I mean, it's always been the case that the response of most of the population to reality is not very good. But I think particularly while the Republican convention was going on, I saw a degree of kind of drunken euphoria and denial in the general population, and a sense of real panic and fear. And I found that sometimes the only thing that can work to reestablish a sense that that people do have a connection to act on the government is to make things really simple for people and eliminate a lot of the other issues, as you were saying. And you just say, look, if there's a murderer running around in your neighborhood, what do? And they say, well, you put him in jail. I say, yeah, you take away the ability for the murderer to kill people. And if they can grasp onto that single idea and just realize that there is a morally responsible thing to do that must be done, that nothing else compares to, and that this is a question that is the only fight right now, and then other things you can take up later. And if you can get people to calmly think through that, then they can act. But because there's been so much conditioning around this question of you have to choose a candidate right now, and that's the only thing you can think about, it's very difficult to get through to people unless they will just grasp the conception of morality on the level that the government must be acting and that they have to be thinking as if they were part of the government.
It's like the question of warfare in general. The President of the United States is not a dictator. He is not elected as a dictator. You don't have general humiliation of the population to a dictator to do everything he wants. Roosevelt was never a dictator. Decent presidents were never dictators. They're never tyrants. Because the art of government, of serious government, of our system of government, is based on argument. It's based on forcing a rethinking. People find themselves in the same room and they find they don't agree. What does that do? The disagreement now is turned into an advantage, because the disagreement forces people to re-examine their standpoint and to consider other things, rather than just plunging ahead on the basis, well, I feel like this today, therefore you've got to give in to me. The dictatorial tendency. And when people say, wait a minute, buddy, there are more people in this room than just you. We're going to have to work this out. Let's see which of us is right. And that's what the American system is. The American system was never intended to be a party system. The founders of the United States did not want a party system. They knew what the danger of a party system was from their experience with Europe, especially with Britain. They don't want a party system. You see how the party system idea is being used by this poor lame-brained Republicans? I don't necessarily he's a bad guy, but he doesn't show much in the way of guts or brains. He's just a guy who seems harmless. But the issue, we do not want a party system. We want a people system. We want a situation in which the discussion goes to the depths. What happens with a party system? People line up on different sides of the party issues. Therefore, that closes out the real issues, because now your argument between the parties becomes the dominant consideration. And then somebody comes out as a third party, as a minor party. They don't have any factor in the thing at all. The problem is therefore we don't want a party system. We may have people gathering in various ways to argue things out. And generally the way that you organize that among states. The states generally become the vehicle, and people cross borders on state policies. And it's a real campaign, but it's a campaign about ideas, about practice, about commitment. And people are today, our citizens who vote, they don't do much thinking. How many citizens out there do any thinking, any serious thinking about what the real problems are? What do they know about economy? What does a typical American leader even know about economy? What do they know about any of this thing? They're ignorant. Our citizens are ignorant. And how are they kept ignorant? By partisanship. That's why the founders of our nation, our republic, did not want a party system. It's the party system which has been our ruin. Because we downgrade our people to football games, to ball games, baseball games. Basketball, basket case presidents like this one we have now, and therefore we are not actually engaged in examination of the issues, the real issues, the ones we raised. I got 3 issues for the presidency this time. Glass-Steagall, number 1. Otherwise, we don't survive. Now, who's against Glass-Steagall? Obama. What kind of an idiot would support an Obama who doesn't believe in Glass-Steagall? There has to be an idiot. Maybe we can remove him from the presidency on the grounds of idiocy, that he doesn't understand Glass-Steagall. When you find the British understand Glass-Steagall, at least a lot of them, over Europe, Glass-Steagall, which was virtually unknown a few months ago, is now a leading factor in the discussions in Europe. We need to get free of the idea of the party system. Not that having parties is wrong as such, but the point is the issue has to be the consent of the nation, the consent of the governed. And that doesn't mean just an arbitrary, taking a vote up and down. That doesn't solve the problem. If you disagree, you've got to fight out the disagreement. You've got to make the issue clear. You've got to educate the population. And that's not done. They say, go, shut up, wait till the election comes, you'll get your chance to get a nomination.
In the John F. Kennedy book, Profiles in Courage, he says, beautifully, after his whole description of the motto of the United States Congress, which is go along to get along. Then he says, party unity, what sins have been committed in that name? And that's the same thing George Washington said, and now we've reached a point where commitment to party loyalty and party unity has become another name for treason.
Or Satan worship. Try Satan worship.
Well, the other aspect, I was thinking about why don't people get this? Because I was thinking the boomer generation went through these crazy bomb drills where they would dive under their desk at the sound of a siren as if diving under your desk would save you from a thermonuclear war. And then I went back and I looked at this film On the Beach.
Yeah.
It's insane. What are they afraid of? A cloud of radiation. The danger in a thermonuclear or a nuclear winter is not radiation. It's all this dust and soot that goes 80 kilometers into the atmosphere, totally changes the climate, lowers the temperature of the planet by 30 degrees, reduces precipitation by 45%, and it goes on for no one knows how many years, so that everything can't even grow, is wiped out. And I was thinking, so you had people absolutely hysterical about Fukushima, where no one died from radiation. Mm-hmm. And no one is that worried about a thermonuclear war. It was a total, this environmentalist movement was a total assault on science and reasoned thinking.
Well, it's the press which has stolen the souls of our people. Mm-hmm. Mm. Because there's no truth in it. The press are a bunch of liars. If they get the truth in there, I guess the guy will get shot or something for telling the truth. But it's that kind of situation. We don't have a system of government on this planet. What we have now, we do have the approach to a system of government. But what is it? It's Russia, it's China, it's other nations which see the threat of destruction of mankind as the issue. And the other side says, well, if we have to kill mankind for the sake of our policy, of our side, of our team, we have to win the game. We have to win the team. It's not the question of what happens to humanity is no concern to them. Mm-hmm. If we have to wipe out the human species and for our cause, well, so be it.
Just so long as we didn't lose.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And this is the point is we are dealing with a population out there which does not have, in their behavior and their beliefs now, they don't have the decency needed to survive. What we have to do is get them to induce themselves to become qualified to survive by realizing they have to survive this, by getting this danger over, and hope that they come to their senses as a result of having the shock of this threat. But our people right now, they've degenerated. And what you have is you have not only successive generations, you have successive degenerations. And that's what we're suffering. We've been worn down. And if you just look at the details, the facts, in the case of Franklin Roosevelt, and the effect afterward with Truman, Truman was evil. The man was just plain evil, but he was a Democrat, right? So he's a democratic evil. Therefore, he's not considered evil. And then you have the Kennedy and his killing, and you have the history of degeneration, a systemic degeneration of the population of the United States overall from the time that Jack Kennedy was killed. Despite all the good things that happened, they happened as a diminishing quality of goodness. And we've now reached the point that the people are they're so debased, they're so degenerated morally, that they will say, even in face of thermonuclear war, they will say, yes, it's bad, but it's not that bad. And that's the slogan of the campaign, of the Obama campaign. But it's not that bad. Right. And the great lie, the greatest and dirtiest and most evil of all lies, that it's not that bad, which is like an affirmation. Let's be bad. It's like gangsters, like these kids who go out there and they kill each other and kill others. The mass killing cases. We're getting it now. We had the mass killing cases from the secondary school generation and beyond. Now we've got kids who are mass killers on the street. And the generation is actually from, the order is not in the order of generation, but it's the order of degenerations. Now you have to be careful about your kindergarten kid. He may probably be a mass murderer. This is the kind of thing that we come to as a result of this process of degeneration. And so therefore this fight against the war is the only issue which can unite humanity, at least in large numbers, to save itself from the danger of extinction.
Yeah.
People have to find in themselves, the American people and the population has to find in themselves the reason to live, the reason to fight. I think what you were expressing with these degenerations under President Roosevelt, President Lincoln, under President Kennedy, there was that leadership that inspired people, that you had a future, the generations coming after you, your children and grandchildren, to actually fight for, to live for. And I remember that just recently in discussions you were bringing this up, where that bind of the century-long, the generations connection from one generation to the next has long been lost. The idea that we're always talking about, people don't actually communicate anymore. You don't have families sitting at the dinner table anymore, really taking up this question of having a sense of commitment to the future. And I think it's important that people have to be willing to fight if civilization is going to survive, if they're going to actually live, but they also have to know why they want to live, why they have to live. And I think that is something that the American people have lost sight of in everything that has been bombarded on our culture, the sense that there's no sense of a real commitment to life, to the idea of what a culture, the beauty of a true culture that is committed toward progress, toward real creative breakthroughs and discoveries. That's what a peaceful society looks like. That's what Russia with the SDE, that's what your program with the Strategic Defense Initiative was to bring about, is a commitment toward the common aims of mankind, a commitment toward peace. And that's what people have to look forward to, because if they are not looking into the future and what that future should hold and acting to create that, they're not going to fight. And I think that's what needs to be in people's mind, to have the courage to be able to fight.
It's true. That's exactly it.
Good. Okay, so that's the conclusion for the show today, and thank you for watching, and please tune in again next week.